Business Essentials Podcast. Unlock your career.
Learn to speak business English like a pro.
You know that moment when someone asks you to recap a 45-minute meeting and you either freeze up or ramble for another 10 minutes? That gap between what gets said and what actually sticks is what separates good professionals from great leaders. I'm Marcus, and today we're diving into the art of executive summarization. Sarah's here to break down why executives forget 70% of what they hear within 24 hours, the exact SCQA framework that makes complex information stick 22 times better than bullet points, and why ruthless filtering beats comprehensive analysis every time. You'll also hear us use real executive communication language throughout. Sarah, why do so many professionals struggle with summarizing?
Hi, Marcus. Thanks for having me. Look, most people confuse being comprehensive with being effective. They assume executives need every single detail to make good decisions, but research shows that assumption is completely backward. Professionals spend 11.3 hours per week in meetings, and 72% of those meetings are unproductive. The core issue is information overload. Once you present more than 7 to 9 distinct pieces of information without a clear hierarchy, cognitive overload kicks in, and the executive brain simply cannot process it all.
Wait, so giving more information actually makes decisions worse?
Exactly. Only 37% of organizations report decisions that are both timely and high quality. The problem isn't a shortage of data, it's that the data is delivered in ways that clash with how human brains actually function. When executives are hit with information that lacks clear prioritization, they experience what's known as decision paralysis. Their attention drops from 91% to 64% after just 15 minutes of unclear information.
So basically, less really is more, as long as it's the right information.
Precisely. And that's what executive summarization is about, ruthlessly filtering to what matters and structuring it so the brain can actually retain it.
All right, so tell me, what's actually happening in the brain when someone presents poorly structured information?
Great question. So the brain operates under fixed energy constraints. It uses about 20% of your metabolic energy even at rest. When cognitive demands increase, the brain doesn't work harder. It reallocates energy. So when you dump 50 data points on an executive, their brain has to decide what deserves attention. Without clear hierarchy signaling what matters most, the brain treats everything as equally important. That creates massive cognitive load.
For our listeners learning English, what does cognitive load mean?
Cognitive load is the amount of mental effort your brain is using at any given moment. Think of it like working memory capacity, how much information you can hold and process simultaneously. When cognitive load is too high, you literally can't think clearly. In business, we talk about reducing cognitive load to improve decision-making. You do that by filtering information ruthlessly and presenting it with clear structure, so the executive's brain doesn't waste energy figuring out what matters.
So you're reducing the mental effort required to understand.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Research shows that information presented through narrative structure is remembered 22 times better than isolated facts. So if you present 3 disconnected bullet points, retention is maybe 10 to 15%. But if you tell a story with situation, complication, question, and answer, retention jumps to 80%.
Give me an example. What does bad summarizing look like versus good summarizing?
Perfect. Let's do a scenario. Imagine an executive asks for a summary on market expansion options. Bad approach. The analyst spends 20 minutes walking through historical context, then reviews each market's demographics, GDP growth, competitor landscape, regulatory environment. Finally, on slide 18 of 20, the recommendation appears. We should enter market A. By that point, the executive has mentally checked out or moved to other priorities.
So they buried the lead.
Exactly. Now contrast that with a strong approach using what's called the inverted pyramid structure. The analyst opens with, I recommend we enter market A. Here's why. Execution timeline is 9 months versus 18 months for market B. Regulatory environment is transparent. Talent is immediately available. This gives us early revenue and validates our expansion model before entering markets B and C in year 2. Then they pause. Does this address your main concern about execution risk?
That's a good phrase. Does this address your main concern? How would you use that in a real meeting?
You'd use, does this address your concern, when you want to confirm that what you just presented actually answered the question the person cares about. It's extremely common in executive communication because it invites feedback and shows you're focused on their specific need, not just presenting information. You could also say, does this answer your question? Or, is this what you needed to know? But does this address your concern specifically acknowledges that they had a worry or uncertainty you're trying to resolve.
What's another mistake? What else do people get wrong?
Biggest mistake: passive recitation without interpretation. So someone presents data like, revenue is $5.2 million, growth is 12%, COGS increased 8%. Facts are presented as isolated numbers with no explanation of why these metrics matter or what decisions they imply.
So they're just reading numbers?
Right. And the executive leaves confused about what action to take. The right way is interpreting data within narrative context. You'd say, revenue of $5.2 million represents 12% growth, exceeding our 10% target. However, COGS increased 8%, which is only slightly below revenue growth. This margin compression suggests we should accelerate efficiency initiatives to maintain profitability through the planned expansion.
Oh, so you're connecting the numbers to a decision.
Exactly. You're showing what happened, why it matters, and what should be done about it. That's the difference between data and insight. Executives don't need comprehensive information. They need sufficient information to make confident decisions. Everything else is noise.
Let's talk about structure. You mentioned SCQA. Walk me through what that actually means.
So, SCQA stands for situation, complication, question, answer. It's a narrative framework that mirrors how human brains naturally construct understanding. Situation: what's the current state? Complication: what's changed or uncertain? Question: what decision must be made? Answer: what's the recommended action and why?
Can you give me a real example? Show me how someone would actually use this.
Sure. Let's say you're presenting a vendor decision. Situation: we committed to the board that we'd launch the new platform by Q3. We've evaluated 3 vendors who can deliver the technology we need. Complication: each vendor has different trade-offs. Vendor A is fastest but most expensive. Vendor B is cheapest but requires 6 additional months. Vendor C is mid-range on both but has reliability concerns based on client feedback. Question: which vendor allows us to hit our Q3 deadline while managing cost and reliability risk? Answer: Vendor A. Speed is the priority given our board commitment. The additional cost is $200,000, which we can absorb within existing budget by deferring 2 lower priority initiatives. This protects our credibility with the board and gives us momentum for the platform launch.
So the structure walks them from context to decision.
Exactly. And notice what's happening neurologically. When information is structured this way, multiple brain regions activate simultaneously. The listener's brain synchronizes with the speaker's brain. That multi-system engagement creates denser, more resilient memory traces. Research shows people retain 65% of information when it's presented with this kind of narrative structure, compared to 10% with disconnected bullet points.
Imagine someone's preparing a summary for their CEO. What's the actual process they should follow?
Great question. So the framework has 5 phases. Phase 1. Diagnosis and question clarification. You confirm the specific decision being made, not just the topic. Most summarization failure happens because the summarizer misunderstands what the executive actually cares about. So you ask, are you deciding whether to expand or how to expand? What's your timeline? What information are you missing that's preventing decision confidence?
So you're clarifying the real question up front?
Exactly. Phase 2. Information architecture and ruthless filtering. You identify the 3 to 4 core themes that directly address the executive's question. For each theme, You identify 1 to 2 key supporting facts, no more than 3. Then you remove anything that's interesting but not necessary. This is where most people fail. They add just one more data point, thinking it might matter. Expert summarizers ruthlessly exclude.
So you're filtering down to signal, not noise.
Precisely. Phase 3. Narrative framing using SCQA. You organize information into situation, complication, question, answer. Phase 4. Multimodal presentation. You add visual hierarchy. Most important information largest and most prominent. Convert comparative information to tables or matrices rather than text. Create a one-page summary maximum. Phase 5. Confirmation and interactive dialogue. You pause after delivering the summary and ask, does this address your main concern? You listen for what's unsaid. Hesitation or redirect signals that something's still unclear.
That's a good phrase. What's unsaid? Is that common in business English?
Very common. What's unsaid refers to the unspoken concerns or questions that someone isn't articulating directly. In meetings, executives often have silent objections that prevent them from committing to a decision. When you listen for what's unsaid, you're paying attention to body language, hesitation, or avoidance that signals underlying uncertainty. You might also say, read between the lines, or unspoken concerns, but what's unsaid is the clearest phrasing.
What happens if the executive disagrees with your recommendation? How do you handle that?
So here's where dialogue becomes critical. You'd say something like, I'm recommending A, but I want to surface the downside so we're not blindsided. Here's what could go wrong. Then you pause and ask, what concerns, if any, do you have? That invites honest feedback. If they push back, you listen actively. You might say, so we agree that execution speed is the primary constraint. Where we might differ is whether market A's smaller size represents unacceptable risk. Am I characterizing that right?
So you're isolating where the real disagreement is?
Exactly. You're not defending your recommendation blindly. You're identifying where genuine tension exists and proposing a path to resolve it. You might say, let me show you the revenue projections so we can evaluate that gap together. That collaborative framing reduces defensiveness and focuses on solving the actual concern.
Let's talk about memory. You mentioned the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. What is that?
So Hermann Ebbinghaus pioneered research on memory retention. His findings are sobering. People forget approximately 50% of new information within 1 hour and about 70% within 24 hours. By the end of a week, only 25% remains. That's why executive summarization can't just be about delivering information once. You need layered reinforcement.
For our listeners learning English, what does layered reinforcement mean?
Layered reinforcement means strengthening memory by presenting the same information through multiple channels or at multiple times. In executive communication, you might present a summary verbally, then follow up with a one-page written summary, then reference the key points in a follow-up meeting. Each layer creates another memory pathway, making retention far more likely. You could also say repeated exposure or multi-channel reinforcement, but layered emphasizes that each repetition builds on the previous one.
So you're fighting the forgetting curve with strategic repetition?
Exactly. And research shows that visual information paired with verbal information increases retention from 10% to 70% after 24 hours. So if you present your summary with clear visual hierarchy, headings, bullet points, tables, and then reinforce it verbally, retention improves dramatically.
Before we wrap up, let's recap the key terms we talked about today.
Sure. The main ones were cognitive load, inverted pyramid, SCQA framework, and layered reinforcement. Cognitive load is the mental effort your brain uses at any moment. You reduce it through clear structure. Inverted pyramid means leading with your core recommendation first, then providing supporting details. SCQA is the narrative framework: situation, complication, question, answer. And layered reinforcement means presenting information through multiple channels to improve retention.
Great. So our listeners can use these terms when they're presenting to executives, structuring briefs, or explaining why certain communication approaches work better than others in strategic context. All right, so the big takeaway here is executive summarization isn't about being comprehensive. It's about ruthless filtering to what matters and structuring it so the brain can retain it. The SCQA framework gives you that structure: situation, complication, question, answer. Lead with your recommendation using the inverted pyramid. Filter to 3 to 4 core themes maximum. Use visual hierarchy to signal importance. And confirm understanding through interactive dialogue. Research shows this approach improves retention from 10% to 70% and increases decision speed by 40% while maintaining or improving decision quality. Sarah, what's the one thing you want people to take from this?
Stop trying to present every piece of information you have. Executives don't need comprehensive data. They need sufficient information to make confident decisions. The skill is diagnosis first. Confirm their actual question. Then filter ruthlessly. What 3 to 4 themes directly address that question? Then structure with SCQA. Lead with the answer, explain why, acknowledge risks. 1 page maximum. The payoff? Faster decisions, better alignment, and perception of you as someone who thinks strategically. That's what gets you promoted.
Here's what we want from listeners. Take your next presentation or summary and try the SCQA framework. Lead with your recommendation. Filter to 1 page. Then come back and tell us, what changed? Did the executive make a decision faster? Did you feel more confident presenting? Share your experience in the comments.
And if you've been data dumping or burying the lead, don't beat yourself up. This is a learnable skill. Practice the framework and watch how people's response changes.
Up next, we're tackling something that makes even confident professionals sweat: how to interrupt without seeming rude. You know those moments when someone's rambling in a meeting and you need to redirect the conversation without looking like a jerk? We're breaking down the exact phrases that signal, "I need to interject," without triggering defensiveness, why timing matters more than the words you use, and the cultural differences in interruption norms that can make or break international business relationships. Whether you're in fast-paced startup meetings where interruptions are expected, or formal corporate environments where they're seen as aggressive, this episode will teach you how to take control of conversations while keeping everyone's respect intact.
That's going to save so many people. The number of times I've seen someone sit through a pointless tangent because they didn't know how to politely interrupt, it's painful to watch.
Right? It really is. Sarah, this was wonderful. I really appreciate all the time and insight you brought today.
My pleasure, Marcus. And everyone out there, practice that executive summary skill this week. Next time someone asks, "How was your weekend?" try giving them a 3-sentence executive summary instead of a 10-minute play-by-play.
Love that practical twist. All right, everyone, go practice, and we'll catch you on the next one. Stay sharp.
See you soon.
Business Essentials Podcast. Unlock your career.
Learn to speak business English like a pro.